What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Make Quick Crafts. Today, after the excitement my players got from my last battle map, I decided to build a druidic Stonehenge battle map that I've been thinking about for a while. I started by cutting out some raised circles to have at the center of the map since I wanted to have a little bit of elevation for the portal itself. Next, I cut out some stone obelisks that will hold some fun little resin runes that I'm going to make later in the video. Then I cut another circle in the center of the base so that I'll have a spot to store all the wires for the lights while still allowing the board to sit flat. Once the center mound was assembled, I bisected the stone obelisks so I can have a spot to implant the LED lights and the runes on both sides of the obelisk. Once they were split, I used my hobby knife to trim off the sharp edges to show a little bit of damage as well as some erosion on the outside of the obelisks. Next, it was time to make our resin runes. I used two identical molds to make the runes and to make sure that they matched on both sides of the obelisk. I also added in quite a bit of green pigment since this whole design is going to be very green heavy. Then while the runes cure, I sealed the board in Mod Podge and gave it all a coat of green spray paint. Once the runes were ready to go, I used one of the extras as a stencil to begin cutting out small holes in the centers of the obelisks to hold the runes in. Once they were all fit in snugly, I pulled out some Sculpey clay and used a texture roller to get a cobblestone texture for the center of the summoning circle. I then used a hobby knife to trim off the excess before putting the clay in the oven to bake, and then everything was ready for the airbrush. I went with a dark stone gray with just a touch of black to help age the stones, but also to make them seem a little darker, like they were a little bit wet. I made sure to paint the inside of the rune holes as well so we didn't have bits of blue foam shining through under our runes. Next, I used a hot knife to carve trenches for the lights and secured them all with just a small bead of hot glue. Once the lights were in, I secured the runes into their respective obelisks before gluing the halves together to almost complete our obelisks. For the final touch, I gave each obelisk a dry brush coat of black to add a little bit of dirt and grime. With everything painted, I secured the stone center to the base, and then it was time to drill our pilot holes. I made the pilot holes with a small drill bit before using the hot pin to poke wider holes through the board. This allowed me to use a small modeling pipe to guide the lights through smoothly rather than having to fight with each wire to try and get it through the foam. I then secured the obelisk to the board with a little bit of hot glue. Soldering together the lights for this build was a bit of a nightmare, and I couldn't really find a great angle to record it, but once I had everything connected and safely tucked away under the board, it was time to add all of our nature bits. I started with a coat of Mod Podge before laying on the diorama grass, making sure to saturate the board as much as possible to cover the foam underneath. Once the whole board was covered, I gave the whole thing a spritz of isopropyl alcohol to release the surface tension on the glue while it dried. For the trees, I actually had a whole excess of them from a previous build, and while the forest is meant to be incredibly dense, I wanted to make sure my players could still access all points of the map, so instead of gluing them in, I used a small nail to make pilot holes and then inserted the trees in without the glue. That way I could remove and replace a tree if needed so the function of the game can move smoothly. After getting all of our trees in place, I gave a small dusting of red flower petals around the base of the mound, and after a final light test, it was time for glamour shots. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons so you don't miss any of my future builds. I'm hoping to start experimenting with a few different things, including some sculpting projects in the future if I can ever work up the courage to post them, but we'll see how that goes. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay safe, and I'll see you on the next one.